Anthony Richardson is back. Just weeks after the Colts insisted that Joe Flacco gave them the best chance to win, they are turning back to their second-year quarterback. That's our top story. We've also got an update on Dak Prescott, plus all the injuries and trends you need to know before setting your Week 11 lineups. Let's get ready for Week 11 today. Let's get ready for Week 11 together, if I can talk, tonight on Breaking Fantasy Football. Welcome into Breaking Fantasy Football. I am Alex Johnson. And like I said at the top, our top story is Anthony Richardson is back as the starting quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. Head coach Shane Steichen, he did say on Sunday, and then again on Monday, that Joe Flacco would start this week against the Jets. However, on Wednesday, Shane Steichen came back to the podium with his tail between his legs and said that it's actually going to be Anthony Richardson back atop the depth chart against the Jets. And not only that, the team plans to keep Anthony Richardson as a starting quarterback for the rest of the season. Sure. Do we believe it? At this point, do we believe anything that Shane Steichen tells us about this quarterback situation? I don't know. It's Joe Flacco. He started 2 games, wasn't very good. Certainly didn't win. Certainly didn't give them a great chance to win. I'm not sure he was any better than Anthony Richardson. Maybe he was completing more than 50% of his passes, but he couldn't avoid a rush to save his life. So back to Richardson, which really is the best thing. This is what the Colts should be doing anyway. Why are they even trying to win at this point? Their team's not in position to compete for anything. Why are they trying to put out the guy who they think gives them the best chance to win, which is debatable anyway? So they should have just stuck with Anthony Richardson the entire time. He'd only played 10 starts in his NFL career. And we're already benching him. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when it happened. It wasn't the move. And now the Colts have realized it, which I don't even know if we give them credit for realizing it. They've completely botched this entire quarterback situation. They're botching the development of Anthony Richardson. It's just a complete disaster. I feel bad for Anthony Richardson. I know he hasn't played well, but I kind of feel bad for him. I do. I kind of feel bad for him. But Anthony Richardson, he's at least saying the right things. He's saying that he has learned some stuff over the last couple of weeks. He feels good about starting. He's got confidence still. He hasn't lost it. He actually told reporters this week that he feels like the past 2 weeks have definitely opened my eyes, is the quote. And then on Friday, head coach Shane Steichen, he told reporters that Anthony Richardson had a, quote, phenomenal week of practice. But again, do we believe anything that Shane Steichen is telling us about this quarterback situation anymore? I don't know. I am happy that they're going back to Anthony Richardson. Maybe it's not so great for our Josh Downs shares. I would say for our Michael Pittman shares, but I think Michael Pittman just isn't good for our Michael Pittman shares at this point. I don't know if it's the back. I don't know if it's the fit with the quarterbacks. I don't know. I don't know if he's just been completely usurped by Josh Downs. Kind of probably a combination of the three. Just this is not the year for Michael Pittman. He's back this week, but he might be droppable. I would say at this point, in most leagues, Michael Pittman probably doesn't need to be on your roster. You don't have to drop him, but he is droppable. But our next top story tonight is one that we talked about last week. We saw it coming. It was all but a sure thing, and it's Dak Prescott. He's officially out for the season. We saw this coming last week. We talked about how he was throwing one last Hail Mary on Monday, seeing a specialist. He flew to New York. One more opinion on whether or not he needed surgery. That doctor told him, yeah, you're going to have the surgery. It's done. It's over. So on Wednesday, Dak Prescott underwent surgery. The surgery repaired a partial avulsion of his hamstring tendon. That is the report on Dak Prescott. And the recovery timeline on that is about 3 to 4 months. So, of course, that means Dak Prescott is officially done for the season. I don't believe they've officially put him on IR yet, but that's just a formality at this point. That's coming probably this weekend, beginning of next week. We're going to see the news. Dak Prescott officially placed on IR. Either way, he's done for the year, and it's unfortunate. But let's get to some good injury news. We have a lot of good injury news this week. A lot of good injury news, big names back in the lineup. Let's take a look at the injury report for week 11. I'm not going to go through all the names, but we've got some really big names in the clear to play column, including T. Higgins. He's back from missing the last couple of weeks with a quad injury. That's big news. Big news. Now, if you're somebody who has been kind of riding the hot hand, streaming Mike Gesicki, those days might be over at this point, because the splits from Mike Gesicki in the games with T. Higgins active versus games where T. Higgins is out, it's a vast difference. It's a big difference. Mike Gesicki is a guy you want to play. When T. Higgins is out, not so much when T. Higgins is playing. We'll see how that happens moving forward. Jordan Love is back as well, or Jordan Love was never out, but Jordan Love is clear to play. He's got the groin injury. They had the bye week, coming off the bye. Hopefully he's back to 100%, or at least close to it. He looked kind of hobbled in their last game prior to the bye week. I expect he's going to look a little bit more healthy, a little bit more the full Jordan Love. Dameon Pierce, he is back. He's had an injury-riddled year this year, but he's a pretty good handcuff stash. If he can stay healthy, he's a nice handcuff stash behind Joe Mixon. Nico Collins is back. He missed several weeks. Obviously, we know about that. We thought he was going to play last week. All indications was that he was going to play. They activated him off IR. For what? Not to play him? Apparently. So we got that one wrong last week. But it's official. Officially. Nico Collins is back from the hamstring injury this week. Michael Pittman, we mentioned a minute ago. Michael Pittman is back from his back injury. He missed last week. He's been battling this back since, I believe, week 3 is when he injured it in practice. He is back in the lineup this week. Probably not in your lineups, though. Brian Thomas Jr., he's still battling this chest injury and incompetent quarterback play with Mac Jones, but he's only on the injury report for a chest injury. At this point, Brian Thomas, he's not a must-start. I don't feel good at all about playing Brian Thomas Jr. I was feeling pretty good about playing him a few weeks ago, just a couple of weeks ago before this injury, when Trevor Lawrence was healthy. Brian Thomas was giving us some big spike weeks. I don't think Mac Jones is capable of fueling big spike weeks for Brian Thomas Jr., especially when it's an injured Brian Thomas Jr. We got Juju Smith-Schuster back. Juju had that one blow-up game before his injury. Biggest game of his career since 2018. It was so big. That he popped his hamstring. But I don't think we're going to get anything close to that type of a role, because since then, the Chiefs went out and they traded for DeAndre Hopkins. Tyreek Hill, he was big questionable last week with the wrist injury. Sounds like he's going to end up having surgery at some point after the season, but he does plan to play the rest of the year, but he's going to be battling that wrist injury. However, he is clear to play for week 11. DK Metcalf is back from his knee injury. Tony Pollard, he is good to go from his foot injury. Also expected to play Amari Cooper with a wrist. Jake Ferguson, Cooper Rush, Devontae Adams, and CeeDee Lamb. He popped up on the injury report today, which is never good. That's never a good thing. When a guy pops up with an injury, late in the week. It's a back injury for CeeDee Lamb. However, Mike McCarthy seemed to indicate that there's nothing to worry about here. CeeDee Lamb is expected to play, but it's on Monday Night Football. We don't have any sort of official word on this injury yet. This is one to monitor. However, I do expect that he will play. Up in the air is Cedric Wilson. These guys are the game time decisions. Cedric Wilson, Jaylen Warren. It sounds, I would lean towards Jaylen Warren not playing. They did activate a running back off of the practice squad today. That's usually an indicator that they don't expect whoever is injured in that room to not play. And this week, that is Jaylen Warren. Then we got George Kittle. George Kittle comes up with a new injury every week. It's a hamstring. It's an ankle. It's a rib. It's a shoulder. This week, it's a hamstring. This week, it's a hamstring with George Kittle. He is up in the air. Sounds like he's going to be a game time decision. If I had to guess, I would say he'll play because he seems to play through it every time. But we need to monitor this one tomorrow for George Kittle. Now, on the out list, officially ruled out for Week 11, Keon Coleman with that wrist injury. Dalton Kincaid is out with the knee. Dak Prescott, obviously, we mentioned him at the top. Josh Reynolds, Sam Laporta, Marshawn Lloyd, this year's Kendre Miller. This guy they literally just activated him off. They opened up his 21-day practice window. And then he wakes up with appendicitis. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Marshawn Lloyd is never going to happen this year. Never, ever, ever going to happen this year. He is out. Trevor Lawrence is out. Tank Bigsby is out. Jamal Williams and Noah Fant are all out. Ones to watch. One of the guys we mentioned out this week is Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman, for whatever that's worth. That opens up things for my guy, Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox, he played 70% of the snaps last week with Dalton Kincaid leaving that game early. He caught 2 balls for 40 yards, and he's going against the Chiefs, who allow the most receiving yards to the tight end position. They allow 78 yards per game to tight ends. And they allow the most fantasy points per game to the position. We got a couple big name tight ends on bye week this week. Trey McBride is on bye. Cade Otton, who's been hot, he is on bye. And we just mentioned George Kittle, game time decision, not guaranteed to play. If you have George Kittle, pick up Dawson Knox just in case that Kittle is out. You can play Dawson Knox with confidence this week. He's a nice streamer. I'm also looking at the Broncos backfield. I'm not going to talk about this too much because everybody has talked about Audric Estime this week, but it's looking like we are getting a backfield takeover in Denver for the rookie out of Notre Dame, Audric Estime. He played a season-high 44.8% of the snaps in Week 10. His previous season high before that was 10%. And that was the week before in Week 9. So they are starting. We've heard it for a few weeks that the Broncos are interested in expanding the role and seeing more from Audric Estime. It wasn't happening. Now, Week 10, it finally started to happen. It was still sub 50% snap share, but he dominated the touches in that backfield. I'm curious to see if they crank that up even more. If we see maybe a 60% snap share and a greater opportunity share in that backfield, Audric Estime this week. Last week, Javonte Williams was turned all the way down to a 29% snap share. It's the first time all year that he was below 50%. So I think Sean Payton, I think the Broncos, they are out on Javonte Williams. They've seen enough. And I've talked about this on other shows. The moment we knew it was over for Javonte Williams was a few weeks back, coming off that big blow-up game against the Saints. Could he build off of that in the following week when he played against the Panthers, an absolute cupcake of a defense? He was the play of the week that week. Everybody was saying, play Javonte. He's going to smash. And then he fell flat on his face. That's when we knew it was over for Javonte Williams. And it's appearing that the Broncos are agreeing. Now, the last thing I'm looking at this week, in week 11, who is the RB2 behind Christian McCaffrey? It was great to see McCaffrey back last week. It was awesome. He was full. There was no easing him back in. It was full blown, typical Christian McCaffrey role. He played about 90% of the snaps. He got just about all of the touches. He had a 19% target share. He had caught 6 balls. He was full blown Christian McCaffrey. But we saw most of the year when McCaffrey was out, it was the Jordan Mason show in that backfield. It was clear Jordan Mason was the guy. However, prior to the bye week, Jordan Mason got injured. And in that game that Jordan Mason got injured, Isaac Guerendo looked pretty damn good. And if you remember, a few weeks prior to that, when Jordan Mason originally injured that shoulder, Isaac Guerendo came in the game and again looked pretty damn good. He was explosive. Jordan Mason is not an explosive runner. He's a really good, efficient between the tackles grinder. But Isaac Guerendo gives you that speed that works so well in that Kyle Shanahan rushing scheme. And he's a big play threat. Jordan Mason, not necessarily that type of guy, which is fine. He did great. Can't take anything away from Jordan Mason. But my question is, with Isaac Guerendo coming in, he's kind of muddied up that situation. No longer is Jordan Mason the clear handcuff, the clear and obvious guy behind Christian McCaffrey. I don't think that's the case anymore. And we saw that last week because both Jordan Mason and Isaac Guerendo were both on the field for equal number of snaps. Now, they each only played 3 snaps, which was about 4.7% of the snaps in that offense. And they each only had 1 carry. Neither had a target. So it didn't really give us enough to see, all right, this is the clear number 2. And they split it even. So what happens? What happens if Christian McCaffrey does get injured again? Is it right back to full-blown Jordan Mason, just like we saw in the first 8-9 weeks? Is it a split between Mason and Isaac Guerendo? Or is there a chance that Isaac Guerendo actually steps up and is the number 1 back in the case of a McCaffrey injury? That's something I'm really, really interested in seeing. I don't know if we're going to get the answer. I'd like to, but I don't know if that's going to happen. So at this point, I think we just got to stash them both or just commit to one guy and hope that you're right. But these guys do need to be stashed because we know the extensive injury history for Christian McCaffrey. He could go down at any point. And somebody from this backfield is going to be a league winner if that happens. We've got to hope we get it right. My money's on Isaac Guerendo. Give me Guerendo, baby. All right, let's move on to the trends to know. I got 5 trends you need to know before setting your lineups for Week 11. The first is Darnell Mooney is trending up. Trending way, way up. Now, we're going to ignore the fact that he popped up with an Achilles injury this week because he's good to go. He's clear. He's fine. No concern there, supposedly. That aside, Darnell Mooney, he hasn't been below a 20% target share since week 6. So Darnell Mooney is playing a full-time role. They really like him in this offense. He fits really well with Kirk Cousins. Darnell Mooney is trending way up. I talked about him this week on the first episode of Title Run. If you haven't watched that, I fully encourage you to go back and watch that. I talked about all the buys and sells that you need to make prior to your league's trade deadline in order to help you win a championship. And I talked about Darnell Mooney as one of the buy highs. He's a very affordable buy high. You can go get Darnell Mooney, and this is why. Trending up, baby. trending up. Also trending up is Courtland Sutton. If you remember, I believe we talked about Courtland Sutton on the show last week for the same reason. A few weeks ago, about a month ago at this point, Courtland Sutton had a game where he had 0 targets, 0 catches, 0 yards, 0 touchdowns, just 0 across the board. It was like he didn't even play, except he did. Since then, he's had a game with 11 targets, which accounted for a 28% target share, 10 targets, a 29% target share, and then last week he had 9 targets, a 30% target share. Courtland Sutton is back as the true alpha wide receiver in the Broncos offense. He's dominating the targets at this point. He is a guy, he's becoming a guy that we can feel really good about playing. I mean, he's not going to be putting up top 10 weeks necessarily, but he's a guy that we can be confident putting into our starting lineup as a wide receiver 3, as a flex play, maybe even a wide receiver 2 in some cases. This role is strong, and we've seen it for 3 weeks in a row now. I don't anticipate that going away. I really don't. Bo Nix is playing well. Courtland Sutton is playing well, commanding targets. Think you can play Courtland Sutton with confidence moving forward. Now, my third trend you need to know is a breakout could potentially be happening in New England, courtesy of Kayshon Boutte. What? Who saw that one coming? No one saw that one coming, but Kayshon Boutte's target shares over the last 3 weeks, 20%, 15%, and 24%. Over the last 2 weeks, he's run 98% of the routes and 100% of the routes in week 10. Kayshon Boutte is starting to carve out a very consistent role in the New England offense. If he and Drake May start to build even more of a connection, Kayshon Boutte could be an interesting sleeper, interesting streamer moving forward in deeper leagues. So keep your eye on Kayshon Boutte. He's available in over 95% of the leagues. Just keep an eye on him. This is a trend you need to know. Not necessarily need to act on it right away. You don't necessarily need to go pick up Kayshon Boutte, but just keep him on your radar. Keep him on your radar. The role has been there for 3 consecutive weeks. Now, someone who I do think is here to stay, and that's Jauan Jennings. Jauan Jennings, he led the 49ers with a 31% target share last week. He led in receptions, targets, receiving yards, air yards, everything. It was all Jauan Jennings. I know we saw some, from this guy and that guy. Ricky Pearsall looked good, Debo, George Kittle, McCaffrey. But I believe Jauan Jennings, he has the most stable role at this point among those wide receivers, including Debo Samuel. Jauan Jennings is here to stay. You can start him with confidence as a top 30 wide receiver rest of the way. He might even finish inside the top 15 rest of the season, beginning last week, all the way to the end of the year. You can play and start Jauan Jennings. And my last trend you need to know heading into week 11, last man standing. The last man standing in Tennessee is Calvin Ridley. I've been as anti-Calvin Ridley as anyone over the last 2 years. I've been mostly right. But at this point, Calvin Ridley is playable. He's a guy we can trust in that offense. He's had target shares of 39%, 24%, and 39% in the 3 games since DeAndre Hopkins was traded to the Chiefs. That's a big-time elite role for Calvin Ridley. He might be here to stay. Will Levis looked better. He looked pretty okay. He didn't look that bad in last week's game against a tough Chargers defense. Calvin Ridley, last man standing in Tennessee, you can play him. I want to end the show, like we always do, with an underdog play. We've been so hot. We've been so hot with these underdog plays. Last week, I gave you 2. Absolutely crushed them both. We smashed the over on the receiving yards for TJ Hawkinson. And we smashed the over on the interceptions for Mac Jones. I told you Mac Jones is a turnover machine. I watched him for years as a Patriots fan. Mac Jones was 100% going to throw multiple interceptions against the Vikings. I think I even called it that he'd have a strip sack, and he did. He fumbled. He threw 2 picks. Absolutely smashed. That was the easiest money I've ever made in my life. And if you are not on Underdog, I highly encourage you to get on there. Download the Underdog app. Go to UnderdogFantasy.com. And when you do, sign up and use promo code YardsPer. They're going to give you a free pick. And they're going to give you a very, very, very generous deposit offer on your first deposit up to $1,000. Get on Underdog. Use promo code YardsPer. And when you do, you can play Russell Wilson higher than 230.5 passing yards against the Ravens. The Ravens have a really good run defense, but that means the teams are forced to pass on them, and they've done it pretty damn successfully. They've been pretty damn successful throwing the ball on the Ravens. The Ravens have allowed the second most fantasy points to quarterbacks. They've allowed the most passing yards. They've allowed the most passing touchdowns. 5 times this year, the Ravens have allowed a quarterback to throw for 300 yards and multiple touchdowns in the same game. That's happened 5 times already. I've never been more confident that you can play Russell Wilson this week going against the Ravens. Nice, AFC North division clash. Could be a lot of points scored. Lots of passing for Russell Wilson and the Steelers. Smash that higher than 230.5 passing yards versus the Ravens for Russell Wilson on Underdog. And make sure you use that promo code YardsPer to get that free pick and your deposit offer. That's the show. That is the show. We do have a question from Dollar Bill. If anybody else has a question, just drop it in the chat real quick. And then we're going to get out of here. Dollar Bill is asking, should we start Anthony Richardson or Caleb Williams as a QB2 this week? I think we got to go A-Rich. We got to go Anthony Richardson. He gives you that rushing. Even when he's not performing as a passer, he can still give you some rushing. Now, I know there were some weeks where he wasn't really getting there as a runner either. But remember, he did have a week where he ran the ball 14 times. I expect he's going to be aggressive as a runner coming out of this benching. I'm playing with confidence. With confidence. Over Caleb Williams, I would play Anthony Richardson. The Bears offense is heading in the wrong direction. I know they fired, I can't even think of his name, Shane Waldron. They fired him this week, which is like hallelujah. So we could see a turnaround for this Bears offense. I do expect that we'll see at least an improvement. But there are a lot of issues beyond the offensive play caller in that offense. Caleb Williams himself isn't playing great. He's hanging on to the ball way too long. The offensive line is terrible. I think we just got to wait and see at this point on Caleb Williams, unfortunately, because he had a stretch there in the middle of the year. Remember when they played the Jaguars in London? He looked good, man. He looked good. He played good. He had a 360-yard game against the Colts in week 3. Since that London game, though, since the bye week, usually we see these rookies come out of the bye week and they play so good. They play even better. It's been the complete opposite for Caleb Williams and the Bears. They've just gone completely downhill ever since then. It's really unfortunate. Hopefully the new play caller will help. But just a reminder, Thomas Brown, who's the new offensive coordinator with the Bears, he was the offensive coordinator for the Panthers last year with Bryce Young. So I'm not sure how much better it's going to get. I'm really not sure how much better it's going to get. I'm hoping, because I'm still holding out hope for Caleb Williams and especially Roma Dunze in that offense. I still believe it's going to happen for Roma Dunze. But Caleb, I don't know, man. It's really, Really, really not looking good for Caleb Williams, unfortunately. So, but anyway, that ends our show. That ends our show for tonight. We got it done in 30 minutes. I said it all year long. I wanted to get these shows down to 30 minutes, and we actually did it for the first time this year. Tonight, it was a great night. We did it. But I have another show in 1 hour. 1 hour. Me and Sam are going to get on here, and we are going to talk the top sleepers and streamers of the week. And of course, we're going to give you our bold predictions for week 11. Stay tuned for that right here on the Yards for Fantasy YouTube channel. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, turn on notifications so you don't miss a